The
It
increased
is
winds.
there too, the wind, but much higher winds than we have.
We used to have fire days, and you guys had snow days. We had fire days, but the winds were never this bad.
Yeah, that's what's happening now. I'm still letting people in, so I want to wait for the stream to abate a little bit. And then once that happens, we will start. So meanwhile, one of the things we do with these conversations on the Commons is that we distribute the chat to everybody who was there. So I encourage you to put your name and your affiliation or your company or into the chat and your contact information, your email address, and that way this also becomes a networking event. So I encourage you to do that, to write that in the chat. I encourage you to have your video on to be in the room. I encourage you to have your audio on while we're doing this chatter in the beginning and talk back. But when we start, to turn your audio off. And so we're at 42. We had 70 people, 80 people registered. Usually that should be about it. So I apologize to anyone who didn't get in. Of course, I'm saying that this is being streamed on YouTube, and I am apologizing for those who are watching on YouTube. All right, I think we should start. Hello, my name is Claire Mauritius. I am a member of the Commons team at the Mass History Alliance, and I'm today's MHA host. Welcome to Conversations on the Commons, a project of the Massachusetts History Alliance. Conversations on the Commons are just that, informal conversations, and you are invited to participate in the discussion, ask questions, and use the chat. I just lost my text. This event is streamed live on YouTube, and those of you watching there are invited to comment and send questions on YouTube, which we will monitor to the best of our ability, which is not always incredibly great. But we will try to bring you in as much as possible. I have a reminder about what's upcoming. On February 19th at 7 p.m., we are starting up the History Studio again, which is also a platform of the Mass History Alliance. And we're starting a new series, which is about publishing in public history, and particularly non-academic publishing. I will be doing an interview with Jane Siaka, who is here. She's the author of Enslavement in the Puritan Village, which is forthcoming very soon, within the next 2 weeks, from the History Press. We will be talking a whole bunch about books and publishing this spring, because we think it's important that the threshold to publishing be as low as possible to everybody. Other topics we're working on is a conversation on the role of archives in public memory, a conversation on publishing in public and local history. We'll be talking with some publishers. And then another history studio with David Whitemeyer, author of Abandoned Massachusetts, Lost Treasures of the Bay State, a book of photography of lost treasures of the Bay State. And a conversation on sourcing Latino history and programming for historical organizations. So here is some housekeeping. Once we start the conversation, please keep your microphone muted until you're called on. That lowers the background noise. This is, again, meant to be an informal conversation. We invite you to turn on your video and also to participate on the chat, and by sticking up your hand in various ways for asking questions or making comments. Definitely use the chat. We send it around. Introduce yourself. And share resources, links will go to everybody who was here. Or, of course, if there are any tech issues, Rachel Hoyle, the Commons coordinator, is standing by to resolve them during the conversation. Let us know if you have something to say by raising your hand. If you're on the phone, which is fewer and fewer people are on the phone, but just ask to break in. Make sure that your name is correct in the participants list. You can do this by hovering over your name in the list and then clicking more. If we get Zoom bombed, which seems to happen less these days, we will immediately close the conversation and send you a link for a new one to start immediately. So look at your email if that happens. After today's conversation, please leave us with a survey response. The link will be in the chat. If no one is posting it right now, I will post it in a minute, but I think Rachel is posting all the links right now. For those of you following the live stream on the Commons site, there's a link to the survey and the conversations archive. I'd like to thank MHA's top sponsors, Mass Humanities, the State Historical Records Advisory Board, Mike Petoskey, and the Deutsche Historical Society. You can find all of our sponsors in the Commons website. The link will be in the chat. We'd also like to invite you to list your organizations in the Commons Mass History Directory, which is free, and you can just go to masshistorycommons.org to do that. And we invite you to sponsor the Commons. Everything costs money, even a bunch of people, volunteers sitting around together. Even if you can only spare $25, we'd gladly have it. All right, that's it for me for today. I would like to now introduce our moderator, Ryan Connery. He is the program and event manager for the Essex National Heritage Area, and he's a new board member of the Mass History Alliance. He's a 12-year cultural heritage and museum professional who has served in numerous roles from tourism marketing to heritage site preservation. In his current role, he oversees the management of Baker's Island Light Station in Salem Sound and helps to coordinate the Essex County Revolution 250 network. Ryan is a USCG 25-ton licensed captain and has experience in coastal and genealogical research, project planning, and nonprofit administration. And he is a member of the Commons team. So welcome, Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ploon. And it's so great to see everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces and some new faces, but this is a great crowd, and we're happy to host all of you here. So thank you for joining this conversation, Revving Up History, promoting tourism for the big anniversary. America's semi-quincentennial or bi-sesquicentennial or sesquicentennial, whatever you call it, is just around the corner, and Massachusetts is preparing for 2 years of commemoration. What events might you plan? Are there ways to promote your organization's revolutionary story? And what funding is available to participate? You know, the big question for a lot of historical organizations. So to help us navigate those questions and more, I want to welcome our two peer panelists to the conversation. We have Sheila Green from Mass 250, the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism. Sheila Green is the coordinator of the American Revolution 250th anniversary for the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism. She comes to the position with a wealth of experience in the tourism and hospitality industry. Her recent experience includes Sail Boston, Boston Harbor City Cruises, and Doors Open Minneapolis, among others. For over 25 years, Sheila has been a relationship builder. She specializes in strategic communications, PR, and marketing. In her career, she has delivered customized approaches to creating communications and change management strategies. Her comprehensive expertise spans strategic communications planning, thought leadership, media relations, crisis PR management, social content development, and project and event management. So welcome, Sheila.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ryan. So yes, it's a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. Good afternoon. Many of you I've met, and if I have not met you, please feel free to reach out over the next few days or weeks, and I look forward to meeting with you and hopefully collaborating. I think really Ryan gave you my background. I want to tell you that working within the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, our goal with the Massachusetts 250 is to bring people to Massachusetts and to encourage travel within Massachusetts. So we have worked with, we've worked, and I have traveled to most of the 351 towns across the Commonwealth, and looking forward to really embracing everything that you all are doing and how we can help you to share your stories.
Well, thank you, Sheila.
Mhm.
And I'll introduce our other peer panelist, Jonathan Lane. Jonathan is the executive director of Revolution 250 and has more than 30 years experience in public history, tourism, and cultural programming. Revolution 250 is a consortium of more than 70 organizations across the Commonwealth working together on the commemoration of the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. While his employment has led him to leading many institutions, including Plymouth Patuxent, the American Antiquarian Society, Berklee College of Music, and the Massachusetts Historical Society, his historical studies have taken him to libraries and archives throughout the U.S. and United Kingdom. He is the author of a monograph on songs for British soldiers in the 18th century, and is the editor of From the Potomac to the Etowah, the Civil War correspondence of Alonzo Hall Quint. Mr. Lane was awarded the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism Revolutionary Achievement Award from Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey in March of 2024. Jonathan is a member of the Society of the Cincinnati, the Sons of the American Revolution, the Colonial Society of Massachusetts, and the Alden Kindred of America. So welcome, Jonathan.
I'm a joiner. What can I say? Thanks, everyone. Great to see so many people who I know and have come to work with over the last couple of years. Thrilled to be now in 2025. I'm going to push back a little bit on you, Ryan, on the commemoration. Commemorations go beyond 2026, and that's especially true for people all across Massachusetts who may be interested in telling the stories of not just things that happen in Massachusetts, but places where Massachusetts made things happen. So, for instance, the Valley Forge or Yorktown, or the Battle of Saratoga, where the vast majority of soldiers were from Massachusetts. So we look forward to working with everybody and telling those stories, and really excited, well, petrified really that it's 2025 already, but looking forward to embracing all of the activity in the next year or two.
Great. So I'd like to give both of you just a couple minutes to talk about your organization, how you got involved, and what you are currently doing. So Sheila, do you want to get started?
Sure. So I have been in this role for just a little bit over a year, and I have hit the ground running, as they say, and working with the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, which is under the Office of Economic Development. We are building a statewide campaign. And we want to really embrace state pride. We want to embrace the fact that Massachusetts is an exceptional place to live, work, and visit. We are utilizing the semi-quincentennial to promote Massachusetts as an exceptional place. We have created 3 programs, which we'll get into during our discussion, that will really make it easy for all of you to engage and participate, we hope. And we want to provide the marketing tools to promote your destination, your special exhibit, and your events. So there's a lot that you can share with us, and as much as you can share with us, we would be very grateful to learn about. There's much going on throughout the state this coming year and the next year, and then as Jonathan mentioned, the following years after. We hope that this semi-quincentennial campaign really embraces everything Massachusetts, so that we can take it further beyond 2026. One of the other things we're focused on in the state program is the many firsts. So there are hundreds of firsts that came out of Massachusetts over the last 250 years that we want to embrace and celebrate. So there's firsts that have to do with education, libraries, destinations, schools, universities, public gardens, many, many things. So we are also embracing all these firsts that came out of Massachusetts and the innovations that really have impacted the world. So I'm sure many of you, as you're listening, can think about all the firsts that came from your community that we can also embrace and tell the stories of. We are also looking at the untold, unknown, or little known stories that have come out of Massachusetts during the Revolution and beyond. And those are things that we are also want to embrace and post on our website, post on our social media, etc. So that gives you a quick overview of everything that we're working on in the state. And we really want to be a partner with all of you. And the more information you share with us, the more we can collaborate.
Great. Thank you, Sheila. Jonathan, you want to tell us a little bit about your organization?
So Revolution 250 got started back in 2015. A group of folks in Boston primarily wanted to get together and put together an event promoting the history of the Liberty Tree and the formation of the Sons of Liberty. And they all had a great time, but seeing as all of the people who worked on that particular project already had full-time jobs, they were all pretty tired and they decided they needed to do something else. So they hired me in 2017, and we have been working ever since on a variety of 250th events. The landing of the British troops, and of course the Boston Massacre, which we just squeaked in under the COVID wire. We did the Massacre Trials as a radio play. And then, of course, the Boston Tea Party, which was a huge event, not just the day, not just December 16th, but also all the activities leading up to it, the marking of the graves of known Tea Party participants, which was a huge event, and also the sending in the tea from places all over the world. They got something in the nature of 4,000 pounds of tea sent to them by hundreds of schools and organizations and individuals. And so it, to be sure, and I think I can speak for America 250 in some regard as well, this commemoration has not gone entirely to plan, but what in life actually does, I wonder. But at the same time, the thing that inspires me each and every day are the myriad of stories in all of your communities across Massachusetts that really speak to what the people went through 250 years ago. And we talk about the World War II generation as the greatest generation for defeating fascism, and I would never take anything away from that. But the more I come to know the people of 250 years ago, the more I stand in awe of the men, the women, the children who stood up for individual rights and liberty. It's really amazing. And I know you are all working on various programs that highlight your communities, and I don't mean that necessarily geographically, but socially, politically, whatever your community is. And that's what I love about this. There's so many different ways to view this story, this narrative of what was accomplished 250 years ago. And Rev 250 is just excited to work with people all across the state to do that.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. So I've got a few questions I'd like to ask of the two of you to get the conversation going. And then I've got a few questions for the audience, and hopefully some of the those listeners can also chime in with questions or thoughts that you have. So let's just get started with some history. What are some of the big milestones and events that are coming up in the next few years and beyond, 2026? So that question's for both of you or either of you. So what can we look forward
Jonathan,
to?
I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, we know.
Thanks, Sheila. I appreciate
Well,
that.
I can say this. They start on February 25th in Salem with Leslie's Retreat. And then, of course, in April, we've got the Lexington and Concord and Arlington and those communities. And it goes all the way through to 2026. So I'll let Jonathan get into the details.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend the rest of the call just going over this, quite frankly. But I'll just make one slight correction. It's the 22nd of February is Leslie's Retreat up in Salem. The Lexington and Concord that almost was. And Alexander Leslie is a fascinating character in and of his own, as well as Reverend Barnard, who really intervenes in the crisis and brings it to a peaceful conclusion. just a terrific terrific program, and the people of Salem are particularly passionate about this story. And I've been working with them now for 4 or 5 years anyway. And each year it gets better and better in the way they tell the story. And it's terrific to have the city of Salem involved this year in a major way. And then, of course, it's Washington's birthday, unfortunately, and so there's all kinds of Washington's birthday stuff that's going on around Massachusetts as well. As Sheila mentioned, obviously, we're 100 days today, 100 days from Lexington and Concord, which is a massive opportunity for the Commonwealth. Just slightly before that, of course, we're going to be welcoming Ken Burns into Massachusetts, who will be announcing his new series on the American Revolution. They'll be doing a program at Old North Church on the 15th, and then on the 16th, they'll be in Lexington in the morning and Concord in the evening, introducing his new series. Sheila and I have both seen clips from what he's produced. I mean, I say clips, I'm talking about less than 2 minutes, so hard to gauge, but it's classic Ken Burns. And it was interesting in the conversation, he said it's the first time he's ever produced a show where he didn't have any photographic evidence to utilize except for the few photographs that exist of the veterans who lived long enough to be photographed. So Lexington and Concord, May is really exciting. We're going to do a brand new, what is relatively a brand new event for Massachusetts, the Battle of Chelsea Creek, which takes place in Chelsea, Revere, Winthrop, and East Boston. For those of you who don't know the story, a quick thumbnail. The Harbor Islands, Hogs Island, Noddles Island, filled with sheep and horses and other animals and fodder for all of these things. And the Americans decided to deprive the British of those resources. They send John Stark from New Hampshire, sends 600 guys out to sheep wrangle. And the British try to stop them by sending a ship up Chelsea Creek, which gets stuck on a low tide, and the Americans burn it. And then first taking all the cannons and everything they could. It's interesting because it ties two events together. The next day they went down and the ship had burned to the waterline, except for the mainmast, which had fallen into the water. So the Americans recovered that mainmast, brought it up to Prospect Hill in Somerville, and put it up as a flagpole. It was on that pole, January 1, 1776, that the Grand Union flag was raised. So it's great to tie these things together, which we're really excited to do. So Battle of Chelsea Creek, that'll be May 24, 25. And then, of course, Bunker Hill, which is happening in 2 communities this year, which we're really excited about. Charlestown is putting together an amazing roster of activities, June 14, 15, 16, and 17. So, of course, it'll feature many of the fan favorites, the Parade of Bunker Hill, and there'll be the 200th anniversary celebration of the monument itself and the setting of the cornerstone by Le Marquis de Lafayette, who will be coming back to participate. And then on the 17th, of course, all of the commemorative activities on the hill itself. And tied into that, just to make things even more complicated, June 14th is the 250th anniversary of the formation of the United States Army, which they're all very excited to celebrate. They'll be here in force in various communities. Veterans organizations across Massachusetts are really embracing the formation of the Army and the Navy, all of whom have 250th anniversaries this year. The Marines, I don't want to leave out the Marine Corps. They, of course, were formed famously in Philadelphia. And so we'll let Philadelphia have that one, but we will certainly recognize their formation 250 years ago as well. And then the reenactment, as I'm sure many of you have seen, is going to take place at Stage Fort Park the following weekend, June 21, 22. We needed a nice big open space. We needed a hill. It would be great if it was on the water. And the people of Gloucester were excited to offer us Stage Fort Park. So that's where that's going to happen. And then once that's over, you'd think we'd all be able to take the summer off. But no, there's plenty of more activity. We've got We will have Benedict Arnold's journey to Quebec, which I know is being put together in a variety of places. There's Noises in Cambridge, which is where it started, and then in Newburyport, where they boarded the ships to go up to Maine. They'll be planning that as well. And then we'll also be, and I know I'm leaving out dozens of other little and important events, but then we'll be running downhill to the Knox Trail, which will start commemorating with our friends in New York in December of 25. It'll come to Massachusetts in January and February of 26. And then, of course, March of 26 will be the big, hooray, we got rid of the British, March 17th event at Dorchester Heights. And then we are hoping to do some things around the Declaration of Independence, of course. And this is something which I throw out to all of you to consider. So in March of 1776, the Provincial Congress asked every town to debate independence in town meeting, and then to respond as to whether their community would support independence with their lives, liberty, fortune, the famous phrase. We know that many towns did. There's about 225 towns in 1776. We know that many of the towns did bring it up in town meeting. Most of them just enter a simple statement. Our representative is instructed to support independence. But others went further and had some interesting things to say. So I encourage you to get into your town records, find out what your town did or maybe didn't do. I mean, there's a number of towns that they didn't get to it. They were too busy electing Hog Reeve or Fence Viewer or something like that at town meeting. And they never got around to the question of independence. But importantly, when the Declaration of Independence arrives in Massachusetts in 1776, every town was sent 2 copies by the Provincial Congress. One went to the town clerk, one went to the minister. Many of these are still out in the towns. So it'd be great to have a sort of a census of what towns still have their copy. And then also the town clerk was asked to write it into the town meeting records. And it would be interesting to know if your records contain a handwritten copy of the Declaration of Independence. I know many of them do. And I'll stop there.
Well, Jonathan, there's no shortage of events and commemoration happening. So, but I know that a lot of our audience here, are from not from those big communities and big milestone sites. So, a lot of unique stories to tell around the Commonwealth. What are some of the opportunities that your organizations have? Sheila, I'll let you go first, and then Jonathan to to participate in Rev 250, to do an event, program, share their story, but don't have a big budget or staff to pull off a big event or reenactment. Where can they share their story, share their events, that kind of thing?
Sure. So we want to be a resource for you. As I mentioned before, share things with us. Tell us everything that's going on in your communities and with your organizations, and we will embrace them. We've created 3 programs to help do that. One is called Museums 250. The other is called Revolutionary Weekends. And the third is called MA 250 Lunch and Learns. So I have also I sent a deck to Ryan, and so he'll post that in the chat later. So you will have this information available to all of you. It has my contact information as well, so don't be afraid to reach out. The first thing I would recommend that you do is go to Massachusetts250.org, and you can post all of your events, and especially as they pertain to the celebration of the American Revolution or the history of the American Revolution in Massachusetts. And you can post your attractions. So it's, and the links will be posted also in the chat. So that's one easy thing to do. Second one is this program called Museums 250. Museums 250 was established to bring museums as key destinations for commemorating the 250th anniversary by showcasing revolutionary items or stories or programs that becomes a unified marketing campaign. Our initiative really provides a comprehensive promotional framework for museums, encouraging collaboration and amplifying shared narratives to engage visitors and enhance commemoration. How to get involved is submit your unique experience or promotion for inclusion in our website. As I mentioned, we will share it on our calendar, we'll share it in social media. And the other thing that makes this program work well is if you have a piece from the Revolutionary Time, you can put a sticker, which we will provide, in your or next to that particular object or piece. And when people come through your destination, they will know that that particular piece is from a revolutionary period. So it's something that we are embracing in a way that we are taking all the museums that are participating or historic homes or historic sites, and we're putting them in our website as a participant of the Museums 250. So it's another avenue to promote what you're doing, and have us promote it for you. The second program is called Revolutionary Weekends. So Revolutionary Weekend, we are planning to kick off the first weekend in February. We're working to get there, and it'll be the first weekend of every month. But if you have something going on in your community that's scheduled for, let's say, the second weekend of every month, then feel free to make your Revolutionary Weekend that time period. But we are creating cadence of the first weekend of every month. What does that mean? It means we are encouraging our hospitality and tourism partners to embrace this. We are encouraging inspiring, fun, and engaging celebrations. These events, or Revolutionary Weekends, are really a title or a theme to engage residents and visitors in various fun and educational experiences. They could include a themed dinner, maybe a special revolutionary rum drink, or if you have a tea house in your community, a special revolutionary tea. There could be workshops, community celebrations, guided tours, maybe a particular place brings out an object or that hasn't been seen by the public. We're not asking anybody to do anything for free or give anything away. It's an opportunity. If you have a ticket price to open your particular destination, maybe you bring a particular object out, or you have a reenactor there for a day, or if you have a bookstore, you bring in an author who's written about the revolution in different ways. There's many different ways to make this work. Some cultural communities, organizations are doing mural campaigns. So they'll bring together to do a mural or different pieces of art. That'll be a part of their Revolutionary Weekend. And revolutionary can be different things to different communities. It could be revolution to revolution. It could be, revolution from the 1700s to today. It could be highlighting our first that made things revolutionary or innovative. So it could bring also to modern times, but we want it to be as inclusive as possible and easy to implement, because we don't want to we want this to be a community engagement, bringing people together. If you have a main street, having all the different retail spaces go together. We are planning to provide like lawn signs that you put in front of your place that shows that this is part of the Massachusetts 250 Revolutionary Weekend, to bring people to your place. This will also be on our website. Our web team's developing this now as a place when tourists or visitors come to Massachusetts250.org, they will go to see where the Revolutionary Weekends are being hosted. And it could be, one community does it in August, another community does it in September. It could be all different times a year. And it could be just once a year, that's fine. Whatever works for your community and your destination. And the last program that we have created, as of right now, oops, did I lose you? Hello? Oh, Ryan, I lost hold on, please give me 1 second.
Oh, we still hear you and see you.
Okay, good. All right. I got you back. Our last program is Massachusetts 250 Lunch and Learns. So starting in the second Tuesday of February, we're doing this a second, and sometimes in some cases we'll have 2 a month because of the interest. We're going to be doing lunch and learns. The key audience is stakeholders, tourism industry, our partners, the commission, MA 250 commission, really anybody who wants to learn more about from the experts about opportunities to participate in Massachusetts 250. So the objective of these lunch and learns is to generate excitement, support, and engagement for the Massachusetts 250 commemoration and programming. It's going to be topical. It's virtual, so it's going to be 12 noon to 12:30. It's going to be speakers are going to be presenting from historians to executive directors of different size museums, the New England Museum Association, an expert in archiving, and we have an Indigenous spokesperson. We have the African American Museum spokesperson. We've got a really diverse group of people that are participating. We're going to be posting these. The first one is posted on our website. We're going to be posting the whole schedule. We have somebody from MEMA who's going to be talking about, best practices to engage in the public. So I think it could be very interesting. You can participate in none or one or as many as you'd like. As I say, it'll be a half an hour presentation and Q&A. Some may go a little bit longer, but I think it'll be really informative, and a lot of people will have an opportunity to learn from different experts in the field. If you have a speaker that you'd like to nominate to be part of this program, we're doing throughout 2025 and throughout 2026, feel free to reach out. We'd love to learn more about other speakers to be included. And the last thing I wanted to say that the state is doing is we did a round of grants in September that we announced. We are hoping to do another round of grants in this month. We're going through the process of legal, and we're hoping to be able to announce those grants for fiscal year 2026 soon.
And Sheila, those grants are primarily marketing and tourism related, correct? And
Yes.
there's a big emphasis on collaboration and partnerships. So is that still going to be the case? I know that was with the first round. Okay.
We think so. I haven't seen the final after it's gone through all the protocol that we need to go through to get the grant, announced. But as of right now, is going to be for marketing and programming, similar to the last grant. Collaboration is welcome, but it's not necessary. Matching is not necessary either. So the total amount that we have for the grant is about $2 million, which really isn't a huge amount, but we're excited that we have that to give to different organizations. The last round of grants for fiscal year 2025 that was announced in September, we had 1.5 million. 172 people applied for the grant, and we were able to give out 37 grants across the state. So, but we it's across the state, so we want to do the best we can. So feel free to apply for it, and we'd love to hear too what everybody's doing and how we can be helpful.
Great. And I also shared your field guide in the chat with everybody.
Terrific. Yeah.
So they can access that. I'll toss it over to Jonathan, but everyone in the audience, feel free to type a question in chat or raise your hand. We'd like to get, the discussion going.
Marie just did ask a question, if that's okay for the grant.
Yeah,
I
see that.
Is that
sure?
So the last round of grants was between 5,000 and 100,000. So I don't know what this round will be, but I can tell you that's what it was for the last time.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I see Beth Folsom has her hand up. Do you want to go ahead and ask a question or make a comment?
Sure. First of all, thank you. This is really informative. I'm really excited to hear everything that's going on. My question is, we are commemorating the revolution. We are not universally not all stories are celebratory, right? We are, as responsible historians, we have to present a real multiplicity of narratives that don't universally make Massachusetts necessarily, or the people involved, look sterling. And so my question is, how do we, particularly small organizations like mine, balance those things with potential for, grant help. I don't see some of the non-celebratory stories driving tourism in the same way, and I'm wondering how we're balancing that full narrative with maybe needing to tell some stories that aren't going to be as economically lucrative. So I would just love to hear a little more about that. Thank you.
Um, that's a great question. Our goal is to be inclusive of everyone. And that's one of the ways to do that is to tell the untold, little known or unknown stories. So we can really embrace our history. It isn't always celebratory. That's why we're calling it commemoration, because it really is commemorating. I'm also working closely with the various tribes for them to be able to tell their story their way. And I think that's going to be a really important part of our broader story. And it's working with the different organizations across the state. We really want to embrace stories as they want to be told by those individual organizations or individuals. Does that answer your question, Beth?
Yes, thank you. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Jonathan, did you want to tackle that as well? Did you want to?
Well, it's less of an issue for me because we support all the events and commemorations that we can, but our budget is not such that we offer a grants program per se. That being said, since its outset, Revolution 250, excuse me, has been committed to telling and highlighting some of these underrepresented stories that are still part of the historical struggle of the American people. We want to honor the people 250 years ago for founding the nation they did. That gives us the space to ask these questions, even though and understanding that it was founded by people who were human beings and made the mistakes that humans often make. And so giving space and room to tell those stories has always been part of our program, and we do that through now. We have a weekly podcast, for instance, and I know there are a number of guests of the podcast who are on this call. And if you haven't been a guest, or you have somebody in mind who you think should be a guest on the Revolution 250 podcast, feel free to send me an email because we'd love to have that discussion. But we've talked with people, for instance, who are trying to build a memorial on the National Mall for the service and sacrifice of people of color, the color patriots of color that are now really, just since the bicentennial, are really coming to light through research of people who were living on the margins 250 years ago, and looking at the roles of women and children, prisoners of war, loyalists who, I just finished a book the other day on the loyalists, and it really is heartbreaking to see, these people who have lived in Massachusetts for generations. Their families are among the founding families of the Bay State, and yet they lose everything and end up going to England or Nova Scotia or places like that, and living. Not everybody ended in poverty, but there were more than a few who did. So it's finding ways that and I will say, to Beth's point, particularly, that's not a great tourism message, right? Come to Massachusetts where we did horrible things to people for 300 years. That's not the message that we need to. But it's important to recognize that this country was founded on the country was founded on ideals that we respect and admire, but we don't always live up to, and we need to be honest about that. For me, it's fascinating to see what all these smaller house museums across the Commonwealth that are now really beginning to investigate their ties to enslaved peoples. And I think that's a really powerful message to remember. My ancestors have been here for a long time. But we don't think about slavery as a northern issue, and particularly in Massachusetts, where abolitionism really drove the Massachusetts in the 1860s. Not entirely, to be sure. There were plenty of people who supported slavery in Massachusetts, even right up through the Civil War. But we want space to tell those stories and share those stories. And so what I would say is when you're crafting a grant application, and that's why small grant programs like what the Mass Cultural Council does, and even the Society of the Cincinnati, where they're not concerned about how many tourists you're bringing in necessarily to a project or a program. That's why those smaller grant programs can be exciting to engage with.
Yeah, Jonathan, maybe you could mention a few of those grant opportunities.
Yeah, well, I put some in the
Oh,
chat.
good.
So there's
Great.
a link to the so as a member of the Society of the Cincinnati, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's the Society of the Cincinnati, Massachusetts chapter anyway, was founded in 1783 by Henry Knox and a number of other officers who served with Washington. There was a national society. They were operate out of Anderson House. So Lars Anderson, another Massachusetts person who had a house in Washington. That's their home now, and they have a whole library. And I want to particularly mention this because this is brand new, and so you're getting a scoop here. And it hasn't been formally announced. But the society, Massachusetts Society, the society was founded to help officers and the families of officers who suffered after the war because they hadn't been paid in 8 years and that kind of thing. And then after that generation, that revolutionary generation died out, the society kept going, but they needed a new purpose. And Massachusetts' purpose is to provide support for organizations and projects and programs that help tell this revolutionary story. And it's not a huge fund. They give out about $200,000 a year, but it's enough. I think this year we made about 35 or 40 grants across the state, and even some just outside the state that are doing interesting work and telling revolutionary stories. So that's one, and the link is in the chat. The scoop is that they're working on putting together a fund for undergraduates who are interested in working in public history. And this fund will give them a scholarship to go down to Anderson House in Washington, D.C. and spend 4 nights down there, 5 days working in the Anderson Library of the Society of the Cincinnati National Library and Collection. And I think that's really important recognition of the power of public history and the role. This is one of the things I said at our Board of Managers meeting. I said more Americans engage with history through public historians than they do through scholarship. And it's great if you have a David McCullough who writes history in easy readable style and can sell 1 million books, but that's the exception rather than the rule. And so I think any way we can support public history and people who are studying public history and can learn how to do it effectively using primary source materials, I'm all in favor of that. So that will be announced sometime probably later this year. And it'll be open to undergraduates to hopefully bolster all of us who are aging out of public history, and we want to see the good work continue.
Great. So, Plune, I saw your hand up a bit earlier. Did you still have a question?
I was going to ask about loyalists, but I do have a sort of related question, and maybe it's too early to bring it up. But I know one of the things that Jonathan is interested in, and it's a thing that Dee and I have in common, which is that we are so interested in the fact that it's not only in Massachusetts, the people in the big towns. There's a lot outside of Lexington and Concord. And one of the things that would be really great to encourage is for people to look at their own towns and how they participated. And I live in a town that was founded much after the revolution. So it's not as if, but our whole our cemeteries are full of revolutionary veterans. So So there's a lot to be done, and Jonathan can get pretty eloquent, as he does on most everything, but on particularly on, people from the Hampshire County taking part in various battles and so on and so forth, and the fact that Massachusetts has sent more people to the Revolutionary armies than anywhere else. So the ties are everywhere. It's not only the battles that happened here or in specific places. And also, all the towns were, I mean, this is not that they did it only out of the goodness of their heart, right? I mean, the
Right.
towns were told to give this many militia, this many people to go to these many places, to show up with this many shirts, this much of this particular good and that particular good. And they weren't always happy about it, but they did scrounge around and get it. And there's a huge story there that is the untold. I want to almost say that is one of the untold stories of the revolution, is that women sitting there making shirts for the armies through the levy. It's not called a levy, but it's essentially demanded of them that they produce. I mean, we don't have factories yet, right? So
Right.
where do you get all this clothing for these people in these armies? Well, you tell the towns that they need to show up with this many shirts and this many breeches and this many that. And those are the people who produce it. They're all over the town. So I'm sorry, that's my impassioned
No,
plea.
no, and it's not just uniforms. It's everything. It's the making of saltpeter. It's gunpowder. It's canteens. It's gun carriages. It's there's this whole proto industrial revolution that's happening all over Massachusetts. Famously in Stoughton, Canton, and what is now Sharon. There are French French ironmongers who come and help set up forges to cast cannons and things like that. Paul Revere is sent down to Pennsylvania to learn how to make gunpowder. And I have to say, just touching on our friends out in the Connecticut River Valley, one of my favorite stories of all is after the Battle of Bennington. Of course, in Saratoga, they have thousands and thousands of prisoners of war. And some of them go to Boston and they stay in the camps that were built for the siege. And they build the very first prisoner of war camp in Rutland, Massachusetts. But many, many hundreds of soldiers were sent out to private farms and private families. And particularly in Northampton, there's a group of about a dozen Jaeger. These are German light infantry soldiers who are sent there, and they're all German farm boys, right? So they're out in Northampton, and they can't believe the fertility of the river valley for growing crops, and so they're having a grand old time farming out in the Connecticut River Valley, and the people of Northampton see these soldiers and just how they're love agriculture and they're working hard, and this the treasurer of Massachusetts starts to receive letters from people all over the Connecticut River Valley saying, "Hey, I saw my friend or neighbor has a German working on his farm, and he seems really. Can I get a German prisoner of war to come work on my farm?" And so you have this, and many of those soldiers, of course, famously stayed not just in Massachusetts but in America after the war, and that's again an untold or underrepresented story.
So I know a lot of these stories, they cross geographically, all over the Commonwealth. There's connections between communities that aren't close to each other. How can we leverage, kind of these networks that we have to connect towns, connect sites that have similar stories that might want to do collaborative programming or work together on sharing their story? I know in Essex County, we started a kind of a quarterly meeting where we invite, historic sites, individuals from all over the county to meet and share what they're working on and encourage collaboration on events and share stories. But are there any other examples of that going on throughout the state, or what networks exist that people can, connect with similar minded folks?
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to do with the Revolutionary Weekends, is to bring the communities together.
Sure.
A couple of great examples of that. One, that of bringing people together, that's not necessarily a Revolutionary Weekend, but it's, Jonathan had mentioned before with the Battle of Bunker Hill. So they're doing the Battle of Bunker Hill commemorations in Charlestown, but then they're doing the actual reenactment up in Gloucester. I mean, what a wonderful collaboration between communities. So there's one example of a collaboration. Another example is I received a call from disparate places around between Boston and Lexington and Concord for the Paul Revere ride. And all these little Paul Revere rides were happening. Well, connected Roxbury to Boston to Cambridge to Arlington to Concord to Lexington, or Lexington to Concord. And now they're collaborating and working together to build one type of a Paul Revere ride. So it's the collaboration that can be very impactful. And if I can be helpful in connecting, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, so obviously the Knox Trail is a multi-community event that's going to happen in 2026.
Yes, of course.
And that's a really important connection. And similarly, it's not just about the things that happen in the state, it's about where do people in your community go during the war? Where are they fighting? Where, the sons of the American Revolution, the daughters of the American Revolution, the children of the American Revolution, these are organizations that are dedicated to recognizing the service of people who fought 250 years ago. And then it's important to remember that it's not just about the men who went off to war. There are plenty of women who went off to war as well, their husbands as camp followers or laundresses. There's 4 women we know of who marched with Benedict Arnold through the wilds of Maine to Quebec. I mean, just amazing stories. I had a conversation yesterday with some friends in Hingham. Of course, they have the Benjamin Lincoln House, and they're right on the southern end of Boston Harbor, so they love integrating the water. And I pointed out to them that one of the attacks on the lighthouse was a frequent point of conflict. But one of the units who assaulted the lighthouse and captured a bunch of British prisoners and tools and all kinds of things, they were actually from the Berkshires. And so you have these Berkshire soldiers coming to the siege of Boston, taking part in these raids out on the water. I mean, it speaks to the versatility of the people, but it also speaks about how this heritage is connected across the area. And similarly, I would also encourage people to look at the families who are among, particularly out in the hill towns, the western towns, that are founders of the town, because many of them have connections to places further east. And, for instance, the Porter Phelps Huntington House in Hadley or South Hadley, they have one of the daughters married into the Benjamin Lincoln family. So they have Benjamin Lincoln artifacts in the Connecticut River Valley. And the Benjamin Lincoln House, of course, was still in the Lincoln family until 5 years ago. So you have these connections, and so there's an opportunity for collaboration between using material culture. There is this, we don't think about it, but there is this diaspora of material culture that goes on as things get passed down through families. And I think that's again another entry point. And it's not just about doing a big reenactment or anything like that. It's about sharing what you have, sharing what you know, and finding ways to do that through social media, do it through a web program, do it through a webinar, come on the Rev 250 podcast. There are outlets that are low cost, high impact, and will give you an opportunity. And the Freedom's Way National Heritage, they do a great program where they're tracking material culture and revolutionary places and people and things through their website. And so there are opportunities to collaborate with other organizations to do these things.
So what you're saying is stay tuned in to Rev 250 and
Yes.
Mass 250.
Yeah.
So as far as the podcast, I just wanted to mention that again, Jonathan. If they had a story they wanted to share from their site, from their town, could they just reach out to you and
Yep.
and get on that? Okay,
I'm the engineer. I'm the scheduler. So
great,
host.
perfect.
and it's a conversation between you and Professor Bob Alton at Suffolk University, who is a great champion of public history, and it's a great way. We have 200,000 downloads. We're entering podcast number 229 next
Nice.
week.
Linda Thorson, you have your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I am particularly interested in getting in touch with the people who are working on Battle of Chelsea Creek and also on the Charlestown commemorations of the Battle of Bunker Hill. I know that someone there reached out to our organization, we're the Malden Historical Society, inviting our participation, and I've written back a couple of times, but I suspect my emails are going into a spam bucket. So that would be helpful just to me personally. I would appreciate getting those contacts.
Linda, if you'd put your email in the chat, I'll send you a message.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Anyone else have any questions in the audience or thoughts? Quips, anything? Plume. Yes.
I can always raise my hand. Sorry.
Sure.
I want to ask about, and I want to ask Sheila in particular about programs that are not necessarily only about it happened here or we have this here, but programs that engage local people in. Is the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism also? I mean, maybe not. That might not be your bailiwick, but tell me about that.
So yes, so there are opportunities if your particular organization does not have anything to do with a commemoration or the history of the 1700s or firsts that have taken place or innovations, you can post on Boston and visitma.com. So visitma.com is the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism's website, and they love learning about everything that's happening across the state to send tours to. So, we work with press spams and individuals all across the state to engage with what they're doing. So there are options. Does that answer your question?
Partly, I guess I'm interested in the grant funding that you're talking about.
In the grant funding?
Yeah, whether you're funding only those things that will pull in outside visitors, or also things that will pull in visitors, like maybe from across the county, or a town, from across town.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's the criteria will be written out in the grant. I can't get into specifics because I don't know what the final rendition of the grant will be, but I can tell you from the last grant, it was for marketing and programming that was based around commemorating or celebrating the Massachusetts place in the anniversary of the American Revolution, and and how that would, or your particular event or exhibit would bring people in, but it doesn't mean they have to be from everywhere. They could be absolutely local. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So in the chat, the National Black Doll Museum asked about abolitionism. Should we talk about abolitionists? And I know we touched a little bit on, highlighting, how we can highlight historically marginalized communities and voices. But what sorts of, I guess, programming do you know about or stories about abolitionism during the American Revolution?
So it's an interesting question. So for Massachusetts, obviously, a lot of work has been done with the Museum of African American Histories. Dr. Noel Trent, has been a firm supporter of telling the stories of both free and enslaved African Americans here in Massachusetts. There's a fellow who's been, there was a project that was done back in the 90s called Black Patriots, which involved people such as Prince Hall, who famously started the Prince Hall Masonic Lodges, and was an advocate for abolitionism and fighting for abolitionist principles, particularly in the early formation years of the Massachusetts Provincial Congress, and then later when the General Court was reestablished and John Adams wrote the Massachusetts Constitution. So there's been some work on that. There's an effort to publicize this work that is underway. We're hoping we'll have that done sometime during the commemoration, all things being equal. As far as actual programming, there are aspects of the discussion of slavery and abolitionism in a variety of programs that are being worked on. One of them is there's a group that reenacts the I can never remember if it's the 1st or the 2nd Rhode Island Regiment, which is a regiment that had both free and enslaved Africans in its ranks, as well as indigenous people. And they are working on a number of projects in Rhode Island, but the reenacting company wants to come up and portray some of the Africans more. There's about 150 African Americans we know who participated in the Battle of Bunker Hill. So they want to come up and be part of that commemoration. But strictly, to get to the point, the strictly abolitionist programs, I am not aware of any that are strictly focused on that. There's a number on congregationalism. The Congregationalist Library is working on some programs on religion, and it does touch on the nascent abolition discussions that are going on in revolutionary Massachusetts, but nothing specifically. But any programs and projects that come to it's such an important story, because there are so many African American stories here in Massachusetts to tell. As I said, the folks, and I'll try and send the link around. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but there's the organization that's working on this monument for the National Mall has gone through Massachusetts records and pulled out every African American or patriot of color that he could find, and he's divided them up by county and then by town. And it's really, and that's again coming back to town records. This is the important part of that story. The people who are living on the margins of society, you're going to find them not so much in state records, although there are obviously court records and petitions that are happening, but it's in the town records that you're going to find a lot of these people. And that's why all of your towns that are digitizing your town records and offering them up for future scholars, they are giving a blessing to society, because that's where you're going to find marginalized people.
Mm-hmm. And I know several projects have been underway, such as what Gene Pickering's been doing up here on the North Shore, looking at freedom suits that were filed, in the 18th century, and several of them successful. And then also people have been looking at the, pensions that were filed for and won by Black soldiers and their families.
And just keep in mind that that's a fraction. Those petitions, they're a fraction of the people who served in the revolution.
Excuse me, I can't find the raise your hand.
Oh, hi Meredith. Yes.
Okay. The man who's making the monument, who's done the research, who knows about the towns, where do we find out what he maybe found out about our town?
I'm going to look up the link right now.
Thank you.
Great. I'm just checking the chat. All right. Any other questions? I mean, I have one that I'd like to know if anybody has thoughts on, and that's how are we going to avoid anniversary-itis, as the term Jonathan coined, with all of this stuff coming up, and how are we going to keep the momentum going, through 2026 and beyond? Anyone have any, thoughts or tips on, how to keep ourselves balanced and keep the momentum up and the excitement?
I'd like to say one thing. Massachusetts is unique with our history. We really are, and we want to embrace that, and we want to really build state pride in the history that we do have and the places that we do have that you can actually witness, experience, or see this history, which a lot of places across the United States do not have. And so we're very lucky and fortunate to embrace that.
Leah, you have your hand up?
Hey everyone, thank you so much for doing this discussion. A notion on kind of perhaps diversifying the anniversary itis, as you said. I'm going to steal that term. I liked that. So I work for two organizations. So Historic Newton, obviously in Newton, Massachusetts, but also for-profit Hubtown Tours downtown Boston. The way we've kind of celebrated revolutions at large at both organizations, I found has been quite helpful with folks, not only, for my nonprofit side, visiting the locations, but also for the for-profit, discussing the revolutions of women's history that have taken place. Massachusetts is one of the largest suffrage hubs of the country. However, it never would pass suffrage as a state level. Also, the founding of the 54th Regiment, these revolutions that perhaps aren't the 250th year, but are embedded within the revolutionary ideas, I think is quite exciting and brings us repeat visitors and repeat guests. For Historic Newton, and I'm excited to learn about this, that we can list these events. We're planning a Revolutionary Newton event and kind of diversifying that away from the American Revolution for a fundraising opportunity. We're talking about alcohol revolutions, right? What roles have different subjects in the revolution played in the way we celebrate it throughout history? So I'm wondering, or perhaps I'm not wondering, maybe encouraging other organizations to look away from just the American Revolution, the Revolutionary War, and as many folks have discussed, thinking about how revolutionary the state has been outside of the 250th. At least me personally, and people tend to agree with me, at least they're telling me that, have found it quite interesting. So I'd like to see what other organizations do with that as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Sheila, I mean, you mentioned you're focusing on some of those other sort of revolutionary stories beyond just the 250. Do you want to talk any more about that?
Yeah, sure. Our advertising campaign is really focused on firsts. And as I said, from revolutionary to revolution, I mean, there's so many things that happen in between. And so embracing those firsts and innovations that came out of Massachusetts brings us to the forefront and where we are today and where we can go in the future. I mean, the first anesthesiology, the first computer, there's so many things that and different communities can embrace. The first basketball game, the first in different parts of our lives, whether it's sports or medicine or public. That we're working with the national parks. They have 10 parks that are have revolutionary history, but they're embracing trails that we can explore. But they're also looking at all of their parks, right? So there is a way to make the narrative more modern and more contemporary.
A number of years ago, there was an organization, I don't remember which one it was, out in the Worcester area that did an exhibit on, it was very simple. It was an exhibit on mail because the pre-gummed folding envelope was invented in Massachusetts. And so, they sort of looked at the history of stealing your letters so that other people, so they couldn't just be generally read. And, I think it's wonderful to embrace. I love the history, the revolution of alcohol is hilarious because obviously it plays such a, you can take it all the way back to the 17th century and just sort of bring it forward in Massachusetts right through Prohibition and beyond.
All right. Moving from that to a more logistical question from the YouTube chat. How can smaller organizations predict the size of the audience they may get from doing an event or a program? And what are tools that they can use to help plan for the right number? Looking at some events like Lexington and Concord, obviously will get inundated with visitors, but How can smaller organizations kind of more accurately plan for larger audiences? And
Yeah, I think it
any
really
thoughts?
for me, I think it really depends on, just how tight a grip they have on the pulse of their community. So, you know, I will say this, and this is not just based on my experience with the Boston Tea Party, but with other events as well. There really is a passion uh, there is a passion for people to tell or to learn or to commemorate their community's history. The small community things that I've attended over the last 8 years, they keep growing in size, and I don't think any of them get beyond 100 generally is the norm, I think, for most small or town, like a grave marking or something like that. If 100 for a grave marking, I think is pretty spectacular. But if you're talking about a larger project or program, it's going to be based, are you working with the DAR? Are you working with other community groups, the veterans organizations in town? They'll all be able to give you a pretty good idea of what to expect for turnout. It'll be better than town meeting. That's all I can promise you.
So I'd like to add to that, if that's okay, Ryan.
Oh yeah,
There's
go ahead, Sheila.
there's a couple of things. So looking at, for example, the Henry Knox Trail that Jonathan and his colleagues are working so carefully and thoughtfully on, and that's going through several communities from the New York border to Greater Barrington to Framingham and many stops in between, and then ending in Boston in March. Those communities can embrace these reenactments and the fact that these people are coming into their towns and embrace what's happening in their town and build something, maybe open extra hours or something around these reenactments that are coming through their towns. So I would say embrace what's happening in your community or communities nearby. The idea of the Chelsea Battle of Chelsea Creek, that is communities of Revere and East Boston and Chelsea, Winthrop are working together to make that event happen. So it's when these communities are pulling together and there's an opportunity for smaller institutions and organizations to embrace that and provide something or open extra hours or do something that they become a part of that community that's taking place.
And I would just add one thing further, which is, and it was Christina, her post in the chat reminded me to say something about you don't always have to start from scratch. There are organizations, theatrical groups, reenacting groups, speakers all over the place who are willing. We've been working on getting somebody to do a history of taverns in the Revolution, which I know Acton just did recently, and now that author is going out to speak to other communities. So there are people out there. If you want to do a program and you're looking for something specific, reach out to Sheila, reach out to me, or any of the people on this call. I'm sure. I mean, this is the great thing about the public history community, is that we are a walking, talking network of people who know really interesting people. And so we want to encourage your participation in that as well. There's this piece that Christina put up there about In Open Rebellion, which is a project that's happening in Salem in February, which is really exciting. And Nikki Stewart at Old North has her play, which involves the minister, the loyalist minister, and a son of and the servant or enslaved person of the minister in conversation on the eve, on the cusp of revolution. And I think projects and programs like that are really exciting to engage with. So
agree with Jonathan. I would also add that you should work with your regional tourism councils. They can be a really big breadth of information and support for everyone. So there's 16 in the state. If you go to visitma.com, you will see the map of the breakout of those. And if you need a contact, feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you with your regional tourism council. Is there a
Yeah,
great
and oftentimes they have, grants, small grants for marketing, and which can help you promote your events to larger audiences.
Yeah, good point,
So
Ryan.
yeah, Jonathan and Sheila, do you guys have like a speakers bureau or a list of speakers that we could send out
Yep,
to everybody so they can have access to those resources?
absolutely.
Great. We'll do that with the follow-up
Yep.
content. So, and Plune, your hand again.
Sorry.
Yes. No,
Um,
please.
I just wanted to pick up the question from the person on YouTube in a little bit different way, which is how can we predict what we're going to get? And I would say, in general, how many people you get is related to a few of your own activities. One is, are you collaborating with a whole bunch of local organizations? Then you're going to get more people. Are you collaborating with a bunch of larger organizations? Then you're going to get more people. Are you doing a lot of efforts to get people in, do a lot of social media, do a lot of pre-conversation? Then you're going to get more people. So those are the things I think that predict. But the other thing that you can also say is if everybody, if the first four people you tell something to say, oh, I'm coming, when is it exactly? Oh, let me write it in my calendar, you know, then you can figure out that you're going to get a bunch of people and but you never get as many as signed up. So for instance, we had 80 people signed up for today and this is a very popular topic, obviously. 55 people were the maximum. So it's never quite going to be exactly everybody who showed up. Registration can help with knowing that, but on the other hand, it's a small threshold, right? Also registration. So, that's your choice. I wanted to say one more thing also in response to what Jonathan said about avoiding anniversary-itis, which is engaging with the very local history and also engaging with today's questions. Really avoid anniversary-itis, like obvious questions like, when are you going to go take to the streets? Like, when is it that you decide? And it's not like the people, I mean, one of the things we should know about the revolution, it's not about people just saying, oh, excuse me, where's my gun? Let me just go find my gun and I'm now going to go to the street, right? We're talking about an organized militia that in governmental context, that is, it may not be, the great big government, but in small governmental contexts, right? They're standing up to the larger government, but they're not coming out of their parlor saying, with their pitchforks, right? but when are you going to go take that step? That's a question that engages a lot of people, and those are questions that are today's questions that lend themselves really well to being combined with those stories of the revolution. Questions of public health. The camps in Cambridge were a wonderful breeding source for smallpox and dysentery. In fact, that the great epidemics of 75 and 76 started there, and they went across the country and up into Canada and what have you. We have the same questions going on today, right? About public health. So those are, getting into local history and combining it with a larger question is always a really good way of engaging people and getting them in and avoiding anniversary-itis, I think.
And I just want to jump onto one thing Clune said as well, which is, be aware of the demographics of your community and how you can engage with new. I mean, for us, we're always talking. I mean, I'm of a certain age where we're saying, where's the up and coming audience? How do we get younger people involved in these kinds of things? And so a number of communities have. They embrace the craft beer tradition. So now they're having beers made that are specifically to a particular anniversary or something that is particularly, I mean, and beer brewers by and large, they love history. And so they love to be asked, can you craft a beer, say, for Isaac Davis, the first man killed at the Battle of Concord Ridge, and they'll do that, and beer lovers will turn out in droves to try this thing, and it can help drive interest. Similarly, other people are interested in the arts or in fashion or in dance. And so knowing what your community will turn out for sometimes it's a road race. We talked about that early on in Rev 250. Do we want to try and do something? Oddly enough, the distance from Framingham, where Henry Knox left his cannons for 2 weeks, to Dorchester Heights is just a little over 26 miles. So, do we do the Henry Knox Marathon kind of thing? We talked about a lot of these different ideas because we want to encourage participation, not just from the people like us who love history and find all these stories fascinating, but we want to find ways to engage new audiences and to give people to build excitement within a community, not necessarily just because of the history, but because of how it can give you an entree into so much more that the community can offer.
Great.
I'd like to add to that if I could, Ryan. Two things. So working with a farm out in the Berkshires that makes hard cider is going to do a special revolutionary hard cider. Working with the folks down in New Bedford who have Madeira wine from Portugal, and that was a drink of favor of George Washington and his team during the Revolution. So doing something special with their Madeira wine. We went with a distillery who has a barrel from Virginia from George Washington's original distillery. Yeah, and so they're going to be popping that in April. So there's a lot of creative things people can do. That like we have a tea house in Arlington that's going to do a revolutionary tea. So there's things people can do that, as Jonathan says, makes it very attainable for all sorts of people.
Great. Well, we are at time. That was a great discussion. Thank you both. Any final thoughts before we part ways? Mike, I see your hand up. Mike Pataski.
Yeah, just an administrative question. How quickly is Rachel going to get this on the archive so I can point people toward it to watch it?
Good question.
Mike, I will try to do so by the end of the day today.
Thank you. All right, Jonathan and Sheila, any other thoughts before we?
Yeah, I'd just like to summarize, Ryan, by saying share information with Jonathan and I. Put your events on the Massachusetts250.org website. Put your attractions on the Massachusetts250.org website. Sign up for our newsletter, and our newsletter will give you information about what's happening across the state and when the grants will be announced. And then work with your local regional tourism councils. They can be really supportive and helpful with resources and other opportunities. And look at us as a marketing tool for what you're doing. So thank you all for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you both.
And I would just say thanks for everyone. Thanks for all of your continued hard work. I'm here as a resource, so anything you need, let me know. And I look forward to being revolting with all of you.
Any things we need to wrap up, Clune?
I was just about to start. I was going to say, let's make sure we send Jonathan so much email that he starts to go, ah!
He's already used to that, I bet.
I know. That's where the alcohol history comes in, you see.
So I just want to say thank you all for joining us. Keep your eye out for the whole season that's coming, and in particular on February 17th, an interview, the start of our new History Studio series. I want to encourage you to please fill out a response form. I put the links into the chat, and I think Rachel will send them out as well. Rachel will send out the chat to everyone who was here. Above all, just keep up the good work, and we'll see you anon. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Sheila. It was a really wonderful event. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.